The Linear Pottery culture is a major archaeological horizon of the European Neolithic, flourishing circa 5500–4500 BC. It is abbreviated as LBK, and is also known as the Linear Band Ware, Linear Ware, Linear Ceramics or Incised Ware culture, and falls within the Danubian I culture of E. Gordon Child. The densest evidence for the culture is on the Middle Danube, the Upper and Middle Elbe, and the Upper and Middle Rhine. It represents a major event in the initial spread of agriculture in Europe. The pottery after which it was named consists of simple cups, bowls, vases, and jugs, without handles, but in a later phase with lugs or pierced lugs, bases, and necks. Important sites include Nitra in Slovakia, Bylany in the Czech Republic, Langweiler and Zwickau in Germany, Brunnengebirge in Austria, Elslu, Sittard, Köln, Lindenthal, Aldenhoven, Flumborn, and Rixheim on the Rhine, Lauterec and Heidenheim on the Upper Danube, and Rosen and Sonderhausen on the Middle Elbe. Two variants of the early linear pottery culture are recognized. The early or Western linear pottery culture developed on the Middle Danube, including Western Hungary, and was carried down the Rhine, Elbe, Oder, and Vistula. The Eastern linear pottery culture flourished in Eastern Hungary. Middle and late phases are also defined. In the middle phase, the early linear pottery culture intruded upon the Bugd-Dniester culture and began to manufacture musical note pottery. In the late phase, the stroked pottery culture moved down the Vistula and Elbe. A number of cultures ultimately replaced the linear pottery culture over its range, but without a one-to-one correspondence between its variants and the replacing cultures. The culture map, instead, is complex. Some of the successor cultures are the Hinkelstein, Grossgartach, Rosen, Lengyel, Cucutani Tripilian, and Boeon-Merisa cultures. Name. The term, linear band ware, derives from the pottery's decorative technique. The band ware, or Bandkeramik part of it began as an innovation of the German archaeologist, Friedrich Klopfleisch. The earliest generally accepted name in English was the Danubian I. Gordon Child. Most names in English are attempts to translate Linear Bandkeramik. Since Star-Savo-Chorus pottery was earlier than the LBK and was located in a contiguous food-producing region, the early investigators looked for precedents there. Much of the Star-Savo-Chorus pottery features decorative patterns composed of convolute bands of paint, spirals, converging bands, vertical bands, and so on. The LBK appears to imitate and often improve these convolutions with incised lines, hence the term linear, to distinguish painted band ware from incised band ware. Geography and chronology. The LBK did not begin with this range and only reached it toward the end of its time. It began in regions of densest occupation on the Middle Danube and spread over about 1,500 kilometers along the rivers in 360 years. The rate of expansion was therefore about 4 kilometers per year, which can hardly be called an invasion or a wave by the standard of current events, but over archaeological time seems especially rapid. The LBK was concentrated somewhat inland from the coastal areas, i.e., it is not evidenced in Denmark or the northern coastal strips of Germany and Poland, or the coast of the Black Sea in Romania. The northern coastal regions remained occupied by Mesolithic cultures exploiting the then fabulously rich Atlantic salmon runs. There are lighter concentrations of LBK in the Netherlands, such as at Elslu, Netherlands, with the sites of Darien, Riemercourt, Fek, or Warem along Chompson at the mouths of the Oder and Vistula. Evidently, the Neolithics and Mesolithics were not excluding each other. The LBK at maximum extent ranged from about the line of the Senoise eastward to the line of the Dnieper, and southward to the line of the Upper Danube down to the Big Bend. An extension ran through the southern Bug Valley, leaped to the valley of the Dniester, and swerved southward from the Middle Dniester to the lower Danube in eastern Romania, east of the Carpathians. Danube lands near Vienna, by Johann Christian Brand, circa 1760. The Danube Bend in Hungary. the Elbe, the Oder. Periodization. A good many C14 dates have been acquired on the LBK, making possible statistical analyses, which have been performed on different sample groups. One such analysis by Stadler and Lenné sets 68.2% confidence limits at about 5430-5040 BC, that is, 68.2% of possible dates allowed by variation of the major factors that influence measurement, calculation, and calibration fall within that range. The 95.4% confidence interval is 5600-4750 BC. Data continue to be acquired and therefore any one analysis should be taken as a rough guideline only. Overall, it is probably safe to say that the linear pottery culture spanned several hundred years of continental European prehistory in the late 6th and early 5th millennia BC, with local variations. Data from Belgium indicate a late survival of LBK there, as late as 4100 BC. The linear pottery culture is not the only food-producing player on the stage of prehistoric Europe. It has been necessary, therefore, to distinguish between it and the Neolithic, which was most easily done by dividing the Neolithic of Europe into chronological phases. These have varied a great deal. An approximation is Early Neolithic, 6000–5500. The first appearance of food-producing cultures in the south of the future linear pottery culture range. The chorus of southern Hungary and the Bugdini culture in the Ukraine. Middle Neolithic, 5500–5000. Early and Middle Linear Pottery culture. Late Neolithic, 5000–4500. Late Linear Pottery and Legacy cultures. The last phase is no longer the end of the Neolithic. A final Neolithic has been added to the transition between the Neolithic and the Bronze Age. All numbers depend to some extent on the geographic region. The pottery styles of the LBK allow some division of its window in time. Conceptual schemes have varied somewhat. One is early. The Eastern and Western LBK cultures, originating on the Middle Danube. Middle. Musical note pottery. The incised lines of the decoration are broken or terminated by punctures, or strokes, giving the appearance of musical notes. The culture expanded to its maximum extent, and regional variants appeared. One variant is the late Bugdini culture. Late stroked pottery. Lines of punctures are substituted for the incised lines. Early or Western. The early or earliest Western linear pottery culture began conventionally at 5500 BC, possibly as early as 5700 BC, in Western Hungary, southern Germany, Austria, and the Czech Republic. It is sometimes called the Central European linear pottery to distinguish it from the Alp phase of the Eastern linear pottery culture. The Hungarians tend to use DVK, Untitled translated as Trans-Danubian linear pottery. A number of local styles and phases of ware are defined. The end of the early phase can be dated to its arrival in the Netherlands at about 5200 BC. The population there was already food-producing to some extent. The early phase went on there, but meanwhile the music note pottery phase of the Middle Linear Band pottery culture appeared in Austria at about 5200 and moved eastward into Romania and the Ukraine. The late phase, or stroked pottery culture, evolved in Central Europe and went eastward. This article includes a brief introduction to some of the features of the Western linear pottery culture below. Eastern. The Eastern linear pottery culture developed in Eastern Hungary and Transylvania roughly contemporaneously with, perhaps a few hundred years after, the Trans-Danubian. The Great Plain there had been occupied by the Star-Savo Chris culture of gracile Mediterraneans, from the Balkans as early as 6100 BC. Hertelender and others give a re-evaluated date range of 5860–5330 for the early Neolithic, 5950–5400 for the chorus. The chorus culture went as far north as the edge of the Upper Tisza and stopped North of it, the Alfold Plain and the Buck Mountains were intensively occupied by Mesolithics thriving on the flint tool trade. At around 5330 BC, the classical Alfold culture of the LBK appeared to the north of the Chorus culture and flourished until about 4940. This time also is the Middle Neolithic. The Alfold culture has been abbreviated ALV from its Hungarian name, Alfold of Onaldisches Keramia, or Alp for Alfold Linear Pottery culture, the earliest variant of the Eastern Linear Pottery culture. In one view, the AVK came directly out of the Chorus. The brief, short-range Satmar group on the northern edge of the Chorus culture seems transitional. Some place it with the Chorus, some with the AVK. The latter's pottery is decorated with white painted bands with incised edges. Chorus pottery was painted, as is presented above. However, no major population movements occurred across the border. The Chorus went on into a late phase in its accustomed place, 5770–5230. The late Chorus is also called the Proto-Vinca, which was succeeded by the Vincat order, 5390–4960. There is no necessity to view the Chorus and the AVK as closely connected. The AVK economy is somewhat different. It used cattle and swine, both of which occur wild in the region, instead of the sheep of the Balkans and Mediterranean. The percentage of wild animal bones is greater. Barley, millet, and lentils were added, around 5100 or so, towards the end of the Middle Neolithic. The classical AVK descended into a complex of pronounced local groups called the Sarkalhat Estarbuk, which flourished about 5260–4880. The Sarkalhat group was located on the lower and middle Tisa and the Chorus rivers, taking the place of the previous Chorus culture. Its pottery went on with the painted white bands and incised edge. The Estar group to the north featured pottery with bands painted in dark paint. The Silmar group was located in the foothills of the Buck Mountains. The Tiszadob group was located in the Sado Valley. The Buck group was located in the mountains. These are all characterized by finely crafted and decorated ware. The entire group is considered by the majority of the sources listed in this article to have been in the LBK. Before the chronology and many of the sites were known, the Buck was thought to be a major variant. In fact, Gimbatas at one point believed it to be identical with the Eastern Linear Pottery culture. Since 1991, the predominance of the Alfold has come to light. The end of the Eastern Linear Pottery culture in the LBK is less certain. The Sarkalhat Estarbuk descended into another late Neolithic legacy complex, the Tiseret Palisi Sozolom, which is either not LBK or is transitional from the LBK to the Tisazapolga, a successor culture. Origins. The origin of the culture must be distinguished from the origin of the people who used it. Culture. The earliest theory of linear pottery culture origin is that it came from the Star-Savo-Chorus culture of Serbia and Hungary. Supporting this view is the fact that the LBK appeared earliest about 5600–5400 BC on the Middle Danube in the Star-Savo range. Presumably, the expansion northwards of early Star-Savo-Chorus produced a local variant reaching the upper Tiso that may have well been created by contact with native EPI Paleolithic people. This small group began a new tradition of pottery, substituting engravings for the paintings of the Balkan ice cultures. A site at Brunamgebirge just south of Vienna seems to document the transition to LBK. The site was densely settled in a longhouse pattern around 5550–5200. The lower layers feature Star-Savo-type plain pottery, with large number of stone tools made of material from near Lake Balaton, Hungary. Over the time frame of LBK pottery and animal husbandry increased, while the use of stone tools decreased. A second theory proposes an autochthonous development out of the local Mesolithic cultures. Although the Star-Savo-Chorus entered southern Hungary about 6000 and the LBK spread very rapidly, There appears to be a hiatus of up to 500 years in which a barrier seems to have been in effect. Moreover, the cultivated species of the Near and Middle Eastern Neolithic do not do well over the linear pottery culture range. And finally, the Mesolithics in the region prior to the LBK used some domestic species, such as wheat and flax. The La Hoguette culture on the northwest of the LBK range developed their own food production from native plants and animals. A third theory attributes the start of linear pottery to an influence from the Mesolithic cultures of the East European plain. The pottery was used in intensive food gathering. The rate at which it spread was no faster than the spread of the Neolithic in general. Accordingly, Dolukhanov and others postulate that an impulse from the steppe to the southeast of the barrier stimulated the Mesolithics north of it to innovate their own pottery. This view only accounts for the pottery. Presumably, the Mesolithics combined it de novo with local food production, which began to spread very rapidly throughout a range that was already producing some food. Population. The initial LBK population theory hypothesized that the culture was spread by farmers moving up the Danube practicing slash-and-burn methods. The presence of the Mediterranean seashell, Spondylus gaderopus, and the similarity of the pottery to gourds, which did not grow in the north, seem to be evidence of the immigration, as does the genetic evidence cited below. The lands into which they moved were believed untenanted or too sparsely populated by hunter-gatherers to be a significant factor. The barrier causing the hiatus mentioned above does not have an immediate geographical cause. The Chorus culture ended in the middle of the Hungarian plain, and although the climate to the north is colder, the gradient is not so sharp as to form a barrier there. Genetic evidence. In 2005, scientists successfully sequenced mtDNA coding region 15997-16409 derived from 24 7,500 to 7,000-year-old human remains associated with the LBK culture. Of those remains, 22 were from locations in Germany near the Harz Mountains in the Upper Rhine Valley, while one was from Austria and one from Hungary. The scientists did not reveal the detailed hypervariable segment I sequences for all the samples, but identified that 7 of the samples belonged to H or V branch of the mtDNA phylogenetic tree, 6 belonged to the N1A branch, 5 belonged to the T branch, 4 belonged to the K branch, 1 belonged to the J branch, and 1 belonged to the U3 branch. All branches are extant in the current European population, although the K branch was present in roughly twice the percentages as would be found in Europe today. Comparison of the N1A HVSI sequences with sequences of living individuals found 3 of them to correspond with those of individuals currently living in Europe. 2 of the sequences corresponded to ancestral nodes predicted to exist or to have existed on the European branch of the phylogenetic tree. One of the sequences is related to European populations, but with no apparent descendants amongst the modern population. The N1A evidence supports the notion that the descendants of LBK culture have lived in Europe for more than 7,000 years and have become an integral part of the current European population. The lack of mtDNA haplogroup U5 supports the notion that U5 at this time is uniquely associated with Mesolithic European cultures. A 2010 study of ancient DNA suggested the LBK population had affinities to modern-day populations from the Near Eastern Anatolia, such as an overall prevalence of G2. The study also found some unique features, such as the prevalence of the now rare Y haplogroup F** and mitochondrial haplogroup frequencies. Economy. Land use. The LBK people settled on fluvial terraces and in the proximities of rivers. They were quick to identify regions of fertile loess. On it they raised a distinctive assemblage of crops and associated weeds in small plots. An economy that Gimbutas called their garden type of civilization. The difference between a crop and a weed in LBK contexts is the frequency Crop foods are Triticum dicoccum, emmer wheat, Triticum monococcum, einkorn wheat, Pisum sativum, pea, Lens culinaris, lentil. Species that are found so rarely as to warrant classification as possible weeds are Hordeum, barley, Panicum miliaceum, broomcorn millet, Seckel cereal rye, Viscera villia, Bittervetch, Vischer faber, broad or field bean, emmer wheat, einkorn wheat, pea, lentil. The emmer and the einkorn were sometimes grown as maslin, or mixed crops. The lower yield einkorn predominates over emmer, which has been attributed to its better resistance to heavy rain. Hemp and flax gave the LBK people the raw material of rope and cloth, which they no doubt manufactured at home as a cottage industry. From poppies, introduced later from the Mediterranean, they may have manufactured palliative medicine. The LBK people were stock raisers, as well, with cattle favored, though goats and swine are also recorded. Like farmers today, they may have used the better grain for themselves and the lower grades for the animals. The ubiquitous dogs are present here too, but scantily. Substantial wild faunal remains are found. The LBK supplemented their diets by hunting deer and wild boar in the open forests of Europe as it was then.